So lonely.
So lonely.
Yes.
Just the two of us.
Desperate to make sense.
Am I in the frame?
Yes.
Yes.
It takes
Okay.
like a minute or
Yeah.
two.
Okay. Are we running? Yeah. Not yet. Donc voilà la sensation de fin du monde. En tout cas, c'est la fin de mon monde.
Ah, c'est pour ça que tu parlais de retraite.
Yeah. Alors, peut-être que j'ai besoin de rafraîchir ce truc.
I'm going to talk about aesthetics and technology.
Okay. Looks like we are set. Yeah, we are set. So, hello everyone.
Hello.
Welcome to the last feedback session of ATEC 6331. And I'm a little bit disappointed to not to have received any suggestions for topics of discussion. So I picked one and I will be presenting it at the a little bit later, and it pertains to the link that I sent in the announcement today to a paper by the French philosopher Gilbert Simondon. But first, before going into that more abstract but not topic, I would like to give general feedback on the class. Number one, on the required papers, and I must say that this has been very interesting to follow the evolution of everyone's production in that dimension. I think that I must say that I have seen much progress into the paper submitted to the class throughout the entire semester. And I'm very pleased about that, and I think that also what happened is that some of the questions pertaining to contemporary art have been refined, and that they are not anymore presented by the students in quite a naive way. And I think that there's much more reflection that's been put by everyone when describing contemporary work of art at the end of this semester, and I think it's good because it was one of the goals of this semester. So in general, I'm very pleased with the quality of the papers, but mostly by the quality of the evolution of the papers. So the trajectories, I think, are much more interesting than the resulting objects, and I think that's very nice to see. And I also would like to connect that with the virtual gallery, and I think that the virtual galleries exemplify in fact the trajectory of the students, and they to me represent something that for the moment, for what I have seen, they are the apex of the evolution of the students' trajectory. And I've found very well presented works of art, very carefully curated works, and the development of very pertinent themes in the virtual galleries. So I think that this worked really very well. So in general, I'm very happy with the outcome of the class, and I know it's difficult to keep up with the pace of the writing the draft of the paper and reading the draft of a colleague and producing questions and comments on that paper, and also then writing a final paper. I know that it's a fast-paced class with quite a lot of requirements, but I think that for the most everyone was able to survive to this. So that's always very good. And at least everyone was able to try to survive. And that's to address the students' concern with the grades. So right now, looking back at the reports from e-learning, I see no one failing the class. So I see no one ending that class with a grade lower than a B or a B plus. That would be the lowest grade in the class would be a B plus or a B. So no worries. And those who will get to have a B or a B plus, they know exactly why they have it. Because they are missing 1 or 2 assignments, and that's the only reason why. And maybe I should point that out to those of you in the risky part of the class who might get a B or a B plus because of that, and maybe they would want to submit a paper for paper 5, which they omitted to submit. And I will not input the final grades until the end of not this week but the next one. So there's time to comply with that and to end up with an A, just like everyone, and say, yeah, it's done. So, and I think that's it for the general feedback of the class.
What about the interaction online?
Okay, the online interaction. It doesn't work well. I know that it's not always possible to attend the session in a face-to-face manner. I know that we had technical problems with connections and stuff like this, so it was really a difficult way to connect in that manner. And I remember doing an entire session without the sound, and another one the sound was not audible, and all of that, and I apologize for that. But I really do believe that it's a strong and important component of the online class, which is the ability to discuss something and to temporarily stop the flow of the assignments and the readings and stuff like this, and to concentrate on 1 or 2 problems that the students want to address. It could be conceptual problems, it could be technical problems, but in an online class we need pauses, and I had thought of these sessions as pauses where we take time to reflect upon what we have done and to question what we will be doing next. It did not work for these many reasons, but I will keep adding that as an important component of the online class. I think it's very, very important and very much needed for an online class. So, because there was no question to debate, I was reading this morning a text, and I thought it was a very interesting text that I would like to propose as a synthesis of the problems that we have been exploring throughout the semester. And I think that the framework proposed by Gilbert Simondon can very, very well embed and encapsulate all of the questions that we have been discussing throughout the semester. So we've been talking about, can a computer generate work of art? To what extent can the viewer modify or transform or contribute to the generation of a work of art? And all of these questions about mainly the reception of the work of art and also the making of it. And also the general question, is there an aesthetics of contemporary work of art that's different from previous aesthetic models, and all of this? And what about beauty? And what about many questions, and what about the relationship of this work to technology? And for example, how different is a work of art, an installation like Davis osmosis. How different is that from a video game, and to what extent can a video game be considered a work of art, and all of these questions. So here I propose a very last reading, and it's an easy one, from a French philosopher. Very easy, very well translated, available online for free. It's only 8 pages, that could allow us not only to wrap up what we've done previously throughout the semester, but maybe to continue that debate in the future. So Gilbert Simondon has that paper called On Techno-Aesthetics. And obviously the question for Simondon is to revitalize philosophy, contemporary philosophy. And what does that mean, to revitalize philosophy? It means to put philosophy at work in domains that are strictly contemporary. It means exposing philosophy to the challenges happening in our time, and exposing philosophy to new questions and new situations. And obviously here what we're trying to do is we're trying to revitalize philosophy by exposure to contemporary art. And that's what Simondon is proposing. So a little bit of background about Simondon. Simondon has dedicated most of his work to our relationship to technology, trying to understand what is indeed our relationship to technology. How is technology shaping our knowledge? How is technology changing our lives, and how is technology impacting all of the aspects of our lives? And that's his main preoccupation. And he doesn't want to detach technology from life. And he comes from a background that is mainly anthropology. And he places our relationship to technology into a very large frame of the evolution of the human being as a species. And he looks back at technology as far away as in the age of stone, and looking at what was technology for the first human beings. So it's in this very large framework that he considers technology. So in that paper, he is questioning the idea of something new, which is something that new and not, something that happens at the, not convergence, but at the fusion between technology and aesthetics. So I have highlighted a few things. He starts by talking about something that he calls Phanero techniques. Okay, so what means Phanero? P-H-A-N-E-R-O. It means making visible. Okay, phanerogamy is something that makes processes visible, and he talks about something that is really interesting that he calls Phanero techniques, which means objects, technical objects that reveal their technicity. And a good example that he takes of Phanero techniques is the Eiffel Tower. Okay, it's an object that really shows the technology at work for the construction of the object itself. And he poses that Phanero techniques is really typical of the modern time, and that takes an increasing importance in our time. So talking about the Eiffel Tower, what's interesting is that the Eiffel Tower had absolutely no means when it was erected. Absolutely no means, just one and it was built for a universal exhibition in Paris.
Yeah.
And it was just meant to show that it's possible to erect the highest monuments on earth with metal. So it was pure phanerotechnics, showing and revealing a technical possibility. And then the idea of transforming that and using that tower as an antenna came way after, about 20 years after that, with the invention of radio in 1921. Okay? But what happens at the same time, and he presents that as a kind of revelation, is people realized that it was beautiful. So at the same time you had that technical prowess, and at the same time the production of an aesthetic object. And he wants us to reflect upon that and to consider these objects from that viewpoint. And he says about the Eiffel Tower, it's technical and aesthetic at the same time. It's aesthetic because it's technical, and it's technical because it's aesthetic. There is an intercategorial fusion, and I think that the idea of the fusion between the two categories of aesthetics and technicity is very important to understanding what's going on in contemporary art. It's not a matter of one being the subject of the other. The aesthetic is the subject of the technology, or the technology is the subject of technique. It's not the matter of one governing the other, or one being used to produce the other one. It really is a matter of fusion. And I think that in thinking of our school and thinking about arts and technology, we need to think in terms of fusion. When art and technology are actually fusioning to produce something really unique in terms and in the form of a phanerotechnique. And I think that there's a very interesting idea here in that idea of the phanerotechnique.
So it will be an artwork that reveal at the same time its technicity.
Yes, exactly. And you cannot detach one from another. And they both appear in a fusion at the same time. It's technological and it's beautiful. And there's suddenly a fusion, there's something meaningful happening at this moment, which is a new aesthetic pleasure, a new aesthetic value that is arising in that fusion. And then he goes on to describing other technical objects, like very simple tools, objects that are meant to help us performing an action. And he talks about the beauty of tools. And he says that in the beauty of tools there's more than just the contemplation of the tool. And he talks about a wrench or whatever tool that is beautiful. It's shiny, the shape is perfect, and there's already an aesthetic pleasure in the contemplation of the object. But he says there's more to it. And in the usage, in the action, there's a new aesthetic pleasure and component that arises. He says something orgasmic. The tactile means an motor of stimulation. And he talks about the usage of the object. And he says that there's a new aesthetic that is revealed in this type of intuition of perceptive, motoric, and sensorial pleasure. And it's true that using a technical object that is perfectly shaped and that helps you performing perfectly the action for which it has been intended gives you a kind of pleasure, and we need to account for that. We need not to ignore that. There's a pleasure driving a perfect car. There's something that exists in the relationship between the way I drive it and the shape of the car, the sound of the engine, and even the landscape moving with the speed of the car. There's a whole ensemble of sensations that are generated by the technological object. And he says we need to account for that. We need to open up our range and spectrum of aesthetics to something that is quite new. So he says also aesthetics is not only nor first and foremost the sensation of the consumer of the work of art. It is also, and more originally so, the set of sensations, more or less rich, of the artists themselves. It's about a certain contact with matter that is being transformed through work. One experiences something aesthetic when one is doing a soldering or driving in a long screw. There is a continuous spectrum that connects aesthetics to techniques. And I think that's a very important thing, and I would like to apply that to games, video games. There's a pleasure playing a video game, and there's a pleasure playing a video game just like you're using a tool, or just like you're driving a car. There's a range of sensations that arise from many things: the visual input that you have, the auditory input, the quality of your movement, and the speed of response of the system that merge together into creating that particular sensation that you have when playing a video game. So that's one thing.
If I may, not talking about video game, but what would be the distinction between design and that fusion between aesthetics and technicity?
That's a good question. Maybe he's just defining design at its best.
It's interesting that you apply it to video games because just one example, my girlfriend's dad, he likes to play driving games, so he has the wheel, he has the stick shift, the paddle shifters, and it's very comparable to the car too. And that's the whole thing, you're trying to get the game experience closer to a car. And he even took a TV tray and drilled holes into it, and everything you're talking about to provide this aesthetic within the game too. And I mean, I sat at it and played something that it was some European driving simulator. I mean, it's really good. It's kind of just to teach you how to drive type of thing. So, it feels like you're driving a real car, even like turning the blinker and stuff like that.
No, and I think that there's that whole spectrum that goes from techniques to aesthetics. I think we really need to replace the contemporary works of art and the video games and everything onto that spectrum. And obviously you will see objects that are more close to the aesthetics end of that spectrum, or close to the techniques end of the spectrum, but we need to always be aware that they are within that same spectrum. And I think it's very important to have that unifying context for all of these technological
but
objects.
all objects will fit within that spectrum, or only those that are inherently technological? What I mean is, can a Rodin sculpture be part of the spectrum as well as an
Well, it still
artificial?
uses technology.
Exactly,
doesn't it?
because it's a technique also.
Okay.
So what we experience in the work of art is not only its visual aspect, but it's also its technological background. It's the making of it that is also belongs also to that spectrum. So we appreciate at the same time the phanerotechniques, which means the gestures and the techniques that have been put in place to make that thing visible.
Okay.
So I think it applies to both.
To any object.
Any objects. And now he talks about aesthetic objects, which answers your question. Okay? And he says certain aesthetic objects call for a technical analysis. And that's very important that we would apply technical analysis in the framework of that techno-aesthetics to aesthetic objects. Okay? So, and he takes the big one, obviously the Mona Lisa. And he wonders why it's beautiful, but he analyzes the beautifulness or the beauty of that painting from a technical viewpoint. And what he says, it's really interesting, and I will read it. So why do people respond so positively to Mona Lisa? Say, this may be due to the fact that this painting is essentially plural. It exists like a superimposition of itself, a bit like a full summary in the so-called exact sciences. On the very same canvas, one encounters the beginning and the end of a smile, but not the exhaustion of a smile, the entelechy of the smile. It's only the two extreme terms of the smile that are painted and revealed, the beginning and the end, but the whole movement of the smile itself is not represented. But still, the smile's complete unfolding is read into the painting by those who contemplate it. They constitute this unfolding of the smile in their own individual or personal interiority. The smile that begins and the smile that ends, so as to return to the face mask of seriousness, are the extreme terms of this temporal thickness. The smile will unfold itself, and at the same time it will also already be disappearing. What is of central importance here is the mystery itself of what is not figured. And that's, for him, the technical analysis of the painting. What's there and how the what is there suggests something that's not here, but that we actually reveal by our own interpretation. Do you have questions about that? That's
I'm thinking about what is hidden, what is not revealed while still being
Because she's not actually smiling, right?
yeah.
But
When we think of it, she is, I guess.
Yeah.
At least, for me, it's hard. It's hard. Yeah, it's hard to perceive it, at least from just all the, remembrance of it as not smiling. I mean, maybe, I don't know.
yeah,
Force
because
myself
it
there.
touches upon the question of interaction.
Yeah.
So what is interaction? In regard to technological objects, usually it presupposes an action from the observer on the work, whereas here the whole thing is interior. Right?
Yeah.
So
Exactly.
what would be specific to technological objects if we consider that interaction also happened with non-technological
Well,
objects?
Interaction only materializes that internal process of the revelation of something that is not actually presented. So interaction is just the materialization of that internal process.
So, would you talk about this sensory motor perceptual gestures
Mm-hmm.
in terms of interactivity or not?
Yes. Yeah.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
But can you give it the same quality? No, I mean not quality, but qualification than what is actually happening in my mind when I look at Mona Lisa? Can we talk about? Can we use the same term to apply to both?
I guess we should. I guess we should consider what's happening.
So there's no specificity to the actual object. There's nothing that is specific to me playing a video game and doing those micro gestures. I thought that this is what you was trying to address. What's going on when I'm doing this and it's translated into that.
Well,
But how can we say that this is the same thing than me looking at the smile of Mona Lisa and
understanding it,
then understanding it?
or you playing the
Yeah,
something.
yeah.
And we're talking about the question of reception.
Yeah.
Okay, so what's going on when you're interpreting a painting or
Yeah.
whatever traditional form of art,
Mm-hmm.
and when you're playing a video game or interacting with the interactive work of art.
Yeah.
Is that different,
Mm-hmm.
and where's the difference?
Yeah.
I think that the difference is with that physical interaction,
Mm-hmm.
you're moving on along that spectrum that goes from techniques to aesthetics
Mm-hmm.
to a more technical pleasure and technical interaction.
But I still feel like they're on the same kind of
Yeah,
area of the
they are.
spectrum, because it's still, I mean, in my mind, you know, viewing art and playing a video game still all lie within, you know, the realm
Mhm.
of play, you know, so.
Yeah, it's a fusion again.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, there's a fusion between techniques and aesthetics when you're contemplating a painting, because you transcend what's actually there, and you actually see the techniques
That has
onto
been
the painting,
okay.
and you're actually interacting with it
Mm-hmm.
because you're reading through it
Mm-hmm.
to something else.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're using a technological object, you're doing the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
You're using that technique and you're addressing the object through the technique,
Mm-hmm.
and you're addressing the aesthetic dimension through the techniques that you're using.
Yes.
So there's a similar kind of relationship in that fusion between techniques and aesthetics.
So, but you were saying that basically when I'm looking at, when I'm addressing the sensory perceptual gesture, I'm more toward the end of the technical.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm more on the end of technicity,
Mhm.
technology. But when I'm addressing the question of the smile in Mona Lisa, I will be more on the aesthetics.
Yeah. But in that same spectrum, but on a different side. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Consider the spectrum just like the idea of the spectrum of auditory frequencies.
Mm-hmm.
You can hear sounds from the lower bass sound to the
Mhm.
highest treble sounds. But whatever you're perceiving is sound, it's the same kind of sensation. So what Simondon says, there's the same kind of sensation. It's a techno-aesthetic sensation. And there's no difference between Mona Lisa and an interactive work of art. If we consider the importance of techniques in it, if we reconsider techniques in
Mhm.
that system. What happened with most of the time with aesthetics is completely avoiding techniques
Mm-hmm.
and trying and just looking at the work of art for what it represents
Yeah.
and for the relationship to what it represents.
I'm sorry, I just need a
Yeah.
little techniques like you know, like the techniques, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Alright.
And
Just making sure I was hearing.
Yeah.
Right.
yeah, techniques.
Sorry. Thank you.
What do you mean by techniques?
Like,
Oh,
so the
Well, not
the-
techniques
not
Q
Q.
E,
Okay.
but techniques ICS.
ICS. Okay, cool. That's what I've
Techniques
been. That's
as
what I've been
opposed to
writing.
aesthetics.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh.
I was just making a clarification.
Well,
but
yeah,
but
that's
the techniques QUE is
Is
part of
entailed-
techniques.
Is
Yeah.
entailed.
Yeah.
Cool. That's a good clarification.
But techniques with QUE is the actual
Yeah.
means of
doing
production.
the task.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay.
The
Okay.
techniques with IC, what it is?
ICS is the general framework of that production.
Okay. Okay. Mm. So, but still, okay. But if I try to push it further, the reasoning, wouldn't it imply that any interaction I mean, yeah, just to make it short, does it imply that aesthetics is that the same, should be, yeah, like the question of aesthetics is as important as the question of techniques? Is it what you mean?
I mean that they are merged together in a work of art. And that we absolutely have to consider the technical aspect of the work of art together with its aesthetic aspect.
Yeah, but yeah, okay. So, but the traditional schools that we all are coming from stands that what is interesting in the artwork is the aesthetics.
Mm-hmm.
So most of the time, that's true. We bypass the technology that
Yeah.
that led to it. But considering that you regular object things, tools, would you? There's no risk that if we push this reasoning further,
Mm-hmm.
that any banal object and tools would be read in the same framework than a work of art. Yeah.
I do not see why they should not.
Okay.
It's the data dream
I
realized.
do not see why they should not, except for one thing, which will always differentiate the work of art, is that
It's content.
the work of art will always reveal something that is not given, or will always engage into the process of revealing something that is not given only in the object, but that belongs to the viewer or the
Mhm.
interpreter. That would be the only difference. But with the tool, you can see that the tool exists also as an aesthetic object with the potential of the things that I can create with it.
True.
And that the pleasure of viewing a work of art, or the pleasure of using a tool or driving a car, is probably of a similar nature. That's what Simondon poses.
So no essential difference between a mere tool and a work of art, except that the work of art will reveal something else.
Yeah. But in the way we experience it,
So I can address the aesthetics of making this object with the same kind of language and framework that the one that I will be using to talk about Osmose by Davis,
yeah.
except that Osmose will have a different.
Except that at one point, osmosis will reveal something that's different from what's revealed by a strictly designed object.
Okay.
Yeah, I
The
think
designed object has only a limited potential of revelation.
it kind of stops at its specifications and use,
Mm.
doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Does not extend further.
Mm-hmm.
A work of art really transcends that finite state.
Thing
So
you make
what would
with-
you say to people that will challenge you as by saying that from a pure engineering point of view, which will be their background, for example, they can see something revealing itself in the tool that they're manufacturing, that they're making, basically.
Well, yeah, because
Can you see or
Yeah.
envision like an
Well,
engineer
and-
talking
and
about
the-
making
yeah,
a bridge?
exactly, yeah.
Pop
and,
up.
and the way I would challenge them is I completely agree that when you, an engineer specialized in building bridge, when
Mhm.
you have that aesthetic pleasure
Mm-hmm.
of that bridge revealing something else, which
Mhm.
is revealing, in fact, the beauty of the work,
Mm-hmm.
okay? It's only accessible to you because you have the knowledge-based background that allows you to make that revelation.
Mm-hmm.
You see the math that's being used to create everything,
Mm-hmm.
and but I do not see it.
Mm-hmm.
And I would argue that the work of art talks to anyone. And I would argue that it's in that almost universality that the work of art distinguishes itself. You do not have to know about painting in a technical sense to appreciate the work of art of Vermeer or Da Vinci or something else.
But
The
should
beauty
we?
that you see belongs to quite a common realm.
It's kind of hard to look at Van Gogh and not kind of consider the brush strokes, and it you know, should we ask ourselves, should we really kind of analyze that and, you know, read that in terms of, I don't know, who Van Gogh was and what he went through?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, should we give a more, I don't know, just understanding it, rather than just the beauty of it, you know?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, is that how it should be read, as a painting, in a sort of autobiographical way,
Yeah. Uh-huh.
and as well as the techniques that
Mhm.
went behind,
Yeah.
you know, that supported the way he felt and expressed
Mm-hmm.
what, you know, what he was emoting or.
Yeah.
But would
Expressing.
you say that Van Gogh speaks to everyone? This is what he just said, like the universality of the artwork.
I don't think so. I saw a meme on social media the other day with a joke, and it had a Van Gogh painting, and it said, "There's a Van Gogh," or something like that.
Mhm.
It was a stupid joke.
Mm-hmm.
Get it? A Van Gogh,
Oh, yeah.
because the van is going,
Uh-huh.
and then it has a Van Gogh on it.
Okay.
No.
And for some reason, it showed up on my Twitter or Facebook or something.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, that's, you know, I mean,
the
everyone knows it's a Van Gogh. That's for sure.
Yeah.
yeah, everyone.
It's aesthetic.
Not everyone in every place is.
Yeah,
I'm not sure
I
if
mean,
you
not
bring this in.
of course, everyone is.
Yeah,
is
but that's a question of universality, right?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
So
fallacy of it.
if even if we keep in the Western world, I had a very interesting live conversation last semester with Patrick Castor,
Mm-hmm.
and we were talking about the question of universality exactly, and I don't know how we came to that point, but we start talking about monochrome.
Mm-hmm.
So how can a monochrome, a white and white, for example,
Yeah. Malevich.
yeah, who will make sense for a mere, a simple, let's say, engineer that has nothing to do with art. For him, it's just like a canvas with white color.
Mm-hmm.
And for him, you will argue that you are the only one to have the knowledge. That would be the same thing for us. For us, it makes sense because it's a monochrome. It
Yeah.
has its position in the course of art history. We know the link and the stuff, so we conceptualize it and we kind of make sense. It kind of makes sense
Mhm.
for us. But for this engineer, it will be the same thing. It will be, yeah, this is revealing something for you because you have the knowledge. But to me, maybe it doesn't speak to me.
Yeah. Well, it's always that kind of dangerous speculation, which is, okay, what someone else would think, and that's
True.
a normal question that arises when one starts talking about universality of
Yeah,
work of art.
true.
Okay, what would someone living on another planet think about this? Would they think that whatever work of art is art? So, and I guess that's probably why we should not use that term universality, because I know I'm wrong when I'm saying that everyone can enjoy Mona Lisa. It's just because for centuries it has been taken as a model of an archetype of painting and stuff like this.
No, but still, I follow
but still,
you.
Beyond that, it feels like there's something that exists in a work of art that transcends individual experiences and individual backgrounds. It feels like there's something that is accessible. It doesn't mean that because it's accessible it does not require some kind of initiation. And I think that it's something that should be considered.
No, again, I don't.
For example, a tool, to appreciate the
Yeah.
beauty of a complex tool,
Coming back.
you need to know what it's made for. And you need to know what kind of transformation on matter you can apply with that tool to appreciate its beauty, its technological beauty. So you need to be aware of things, you need to have a certain amount of knowledge. So it's not, when we say universality, it's not pure naive universality. It's universality within a reasonable range of knowledge. So for example, presenting Kazimir Malevich to a class of students, yeah, definitely you would need to introduce them to art history and to present it. And then in that context there's a universal reception of it. So yeah, universality is not the right term. It's
No.
probably called generalized.
What I was questioning was not, because I think
But then you would say,
I agree with you on the
how
realm of
different-
artwork.
how different would that be from the knowledge required to appreciate the beauty of a bridge or
Exactly.
the Eiffel Tower?
Yeah, my question was more on the tool side, like how do you, how do you challenge? But you already replied.
Well, I think
The people that will see something beyond the tool within the tool.
So for example, on the video games,
Yeah.
I have a hard time seeing the work of art beyond the technical prowess of 3D or real-time rendering and programming and stuff like that. That's true. And I know what it takes to do it. But that's probably a wrong example.
Well, I think in terms of a bridge, I mean, if you're not like 100% ignorant, I guess you still appreciate the math that goes into it. You know, everyone at a certain level, I think, with at least within. Well, here we go with everyone again. Most people at a certain level within, you know, a modern society can look at a bridge and, you know, at least at some point understand that there's some mathematics going on there, whether you understand the complexity or of the math or not. You know, I think the same could be said for contemporary art. You know, it's like I see a lot of contemporary art that aesthetically I don't understand or maybe like, but and then, you know, read about the concept behind it, and I might not really feel that the artist believes in it or something like that, but I still, you know, I still understand it as a concept working to create this type of piece of art, and, you know, have some type of appreciation for it, whether I like it or not.
At the same time, I know that I might be wrong because you have those big infrastructure that stay over time, like the famous or the Greek temples or this kind of thing. So in the case of the bridge, it would be maybe a bridge that would be there for yeah. I'm not sure if you have 2,000 years old bridge from the Romanian empires in Europe. But yeah, I can also see an engineer telling me this has been there for 500 years and we still use it. So maybe it give it a different status when it stay over time. But yeah.
Well, I think such detachment from that historical period gives it a sort of aesthetic. I mean, we look at cultures that still, dress and have their culture very much grounded in older world, kind of ancient traditions, and we go, God, what beautiful, clothes they're wearing and stuff like that. But really, it's just of a different time, I guess. I'm sure whether it was beautiful then or not, I mean, take a little bit of research, take a historian to verify that, but I think it was probably as much form as it was function.
So you see that we cannot conclude. And
we
that's
need a historian.
That's the reality of that question of aesthetics. We cannot conclude. We can only expand the range of thoughts that should go into analyzing, understanding, and enjoying contemporary art. We can only extend the horizon of thoughts that we can produce on that. And that was the goal of that paper, Techno-Aesthetics. So can the incorporation of what Simondon calls the technological pleasure and techno-aesthetics, how can that revitalize what we think of works of art, and especially in the context of that fusion between art and technology that you can see in an interactive and complex installation. So part of how can we understand better the aesthetic pleasure at interacting with this work of art, if not by saying it feels like also we need to think of that technological object as a tool, and we need to incorporate that sensory motor pleasure that we have in the interaction. We need not to forget that we engage our body in the reception of the work of art, and we engage our body in a pleasant way. The system is fluidly responding to my movements and producing something that I can contain within the range of my expectations. I'm not completely distressed by the response of the system. There's some harmonious relationship between my actions and what's displayed and stuff like this. And that Simondon calls it a technological based enjoyment of the object. And that technological enjoyment of the object is not different from the technological enjoyment of using a well-designed tool to do something.
Yes.
And it comes together, and it's not two separate things. Again, there's fusion. This comes together with that other purely aesthetic pleasure, which is what happens when I'm looking at the Da Vinci thing and I'm seeing something paradoxical, and I'm seeing something plural, and I'm seeing something that is at the same time appearing and disappearing. And that's that quality of the work of art, that it's always in that process of revealing itself while disappearing. You see something of the work of art, and as you see it, it goes away. And you keep looking at it, and you know and feel that what your experience is not in kind different from what another one is seeing and experiences with the same work of art. you know that there are difference in gradations of that. It's more or less intense, but you know that the kind of phenomenon is happening for someone else, and it's that also contributes to your aesthetic emotion, is that you realize that kind of universality of the experience of that work of art. So I think that what we are doing, and that was the goal of the class, is really expanding the horizon, yes, of the analysis and the experience of works of art, without concluding.
Yeah, well, one or maybe two last question will be, how does it function in the case of pure non-technological forms? I'm thinking about dance, for example, performance that could make use of technology, but that do not require technology unless you define movement, gesture as a technological thing.
Yeah.
And the other case to be more, maybe you will see, oh no, but the other case will be poetry and literature.
Okay, so let's talk about dance first.
Yeah.
So dance looks like it's not technological. So how is it not technological? So dance would be just natural.
Yeah, if we refer to technology as something exterior,
yeah,
that augment, or like a prosthesis that is incorporated.
Well, dancing entails music.
Not
not
time.
always.
Not always.
Not always.
But it entails some type of rhythm or some type of tradition, I would think.
I could be just
Sometimes.
dancing now without any years of.
Yeah, and there's been plenty of experiments of dance completely detached from music and from rhythmical patterns and just being a pure art of movement. So what happens when we are contemplating that? To me, that's just on that spectrum. It's really on the most aesthetic thing, except that there's the idea of the body. Okay, so you're contemplating a body, and you're contemplating the beauty of the movement of the body, and that pleasure is technological.
It's
How
still
we
right.
can move,
Okay.
and as you
Looking.
dance and as you're perceiving dance, you're shaping an ideal image of the body in the ideal movement that it performs.
There's
So
still
there's some form of technological enjoyment and pleasure in the dance.
In terms of looking at the body almost like a machine or
Like,
something.
hey,
like that.
exactly.
there's
yeah.
certain techniques that have to be kind of processes that have to be undertaken for it to be dancing, I guess.
Yeah, and you see,
Yeah.
it's again a Fanero techniques that
Yeah,
are
that shows.
exactly, it reveals possibilities of the human body of which you would not be aware if someone had not danced them for you. I think that's
And in for poetry and literature.
poetry. It's highly technological.
Words or technology.
Words to me are really technological objects,
Letters.
Okay.
and even oral poetry is technological. It's really using that technological systems of organizations of phonemes and stuff like this, and the interplay and the use of that beautiful tool is the language.
Yeah, language. Okay.
And you see it presents that horizon of possibilities.
That's right. Yeah. I
So
forgot
poetry would be a deep,
that. Yeah, a deep
and that's
technological.
very deep techno-aesthetic object,
Okay.
I think. Just like a beautiful interactive installation, it
Yeah.
has the same depth in the relationship between the technological, between the techniques and the aesthetics. So yeah.
Yeah, I see for poetry.
So you see, as a conclusion, it's really a new, a reopening of the debate on the question of aesthetics and technology and arts and technology. So all I can do is to encourage you in reading that text. And for those of you who are missing one assignment, one paper, I would suggest something easy is go ahead, download these 8 to 10 pages and write me a summary of it. Something very simple. It could be summarized, I think, in, let's say, 300 words. Summary of that. And the summary does not have to be objective. It's the summary of your understanding of that text. And I will take that for the missing paper. Okay? So very easy to produce thing, read that, summarize that. But the summary has to show me that you've read it from the first word to the last one. But it doesn't have to be faithful to the text. But it has to show that you've read the text. So it's a very artistic summary that I'm asking you. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you.